start streaming. So anyone who was not able to join us, we are going to be introducing our guest in a moment. This will also be available on YouTube for anybody who wants to revisit the excitement that we've had today.
I'm going to be YouTube famous.
Morning.
Good morning. All right, let me turn up the volume. Apologies for everyone in the class who can't hear anything right now. All right, hi Nancy, thank you for joining us. I don't know why we haven't.
I'm trying to set up my web. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Can
I
you
don't
see
see
us?
my webcam's not working.
Uh-oh. We have a nice picture though to keep us company, so that's good.
Okay, I think I know why. Here we go. See if that works. Can you see me?
Not yet.
I had another camera program open just checking my background, so
Okay.
I don't know if we have to do the call again or if it will just connect.
Okay, we will call you back in a moment.
Okay.
Technology is fun. This. Sorry. All right.
Hey, there we go.
Awesome.
Okay, good.
So,
How's it in Arizona? Is it raining?
It was raining earlier this morning.
Yay! Are your deserts happy like ours are?
Define happy.
Blooming.
yes,
Yes.
Okay,
they
good.
have been beautiful. So, I'm sorry, I'm behind the webcam right now, so maybe I'll come and sit in the audience. So,
How are you, Jill?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you? Somewhere. So, just to get us oriented, if you wouldn't mind, we've discussed a lot of depressing things about the state of the ocean, but I know you're doing some really cool work and things that actually have provided a lot of successes with even all of the challenges you've had to surmount in a lot of the permitting and different things you've done. So if you could, they've had access to your website, but if you wouldn't mind sharing some about the projects, about the challenges, and about some of the things that maybe us in this classroom, particularly some of us who've maybe never lived by the ocean, what are things we can do and how do we contribute to that?
Okay, first, can I ask what everybody's interests are? Is anybody in there that's going into careers in environmental science or ocean science, or what are all your interests? Let's start right there.
My interests are actually game design, level design. So I'm trying to create virtual space. Not really focusing on environmental studies so much.
Okay.
Being Native American, I kind of do follow that the environment needs to be helped sometimes.
Okay.
And let us know if you can't hear anyone, because I don't know how well it picks up sound.
That sounds good. How about Powerade guy?
Sorry, guys.
I'm also in game design. I think you'll find that there's not many environmental science majors in here, or really anything environmental related, because it is a tech college. So a lot of game stuff, a lot of movies and film, robotics, network security, computer science. And did I miss any of the big ones? Art and animation, yeah. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, good. Well, that helps me to relate to you. So that's very helpful. If that's what everybody's major is, then that's really probably all I need to know. All right. So I'm a scientist, obviously, and however, I run a one-person business, and so the nonprofit is called Get Inspired. And I started the business because I kept getting laid off from other nonprofits, essentially. And this might be a direction that some of you end up having to go in, either freelancing or starting your own businesses in order to be employed. But the story is the same. Starting a business, I do everything myself, except for luckily in my field, I have a lot of people who want to volunteer to do work. And you probably won't get a lot of volunteers to help you with your work. But on the environmental front, because I know you guys have been talking about dismal doomsday overfishing and ocean acidification and all the shit that we have to worry about that's going on in the world at the moment. The bright side is that people who live in these areas, whether it's in the desert or in the prairies or in the wetlands or the on the coast, wanted help. And it just seems as though in the last year or so, a lot of people have been mobilized, especially to go out and work in their communities. So that's all good stuff because it gives people hope. So I've been fortunate enough to have probably, I don't know, 1,000, 1,500 different volunteers help me with the work that I do. And I do ocean restoration projects. And what that means is I go out and restore something that's missing in the ocean. And in the case where I live, it was kelp forests. And you probably see right behind me here some graphics. I use a lot of graphic designers and artists myself for projects that I do because I can't relate to anybody about stuff that's in the ocean without art and graphics. So I work really closely with some artists and graphic designers who can help me to show off what I'm doing in a very graphic way. I just shared with your teacher a video that was made by an art student, a filmmaker. She wanted to show what the kind of work that I'm doing. And again, I can't portray underwater snails and algae to people without the help of graphic designers and artists and filmmakers who can kind of make it sexy and make it look cool. I'm working right now with a student at Otis College, which is right here in Los Angeles. It's an art school, and he's making a 3D short film to make people love abalone, which is another species I work with. It's a snail, so it's very hard to get people to love it. But if I can make it really look cute, give it a personality, and attach a name to it, it helps people understand why what I'm doing is important. And it can also help tell the story of how we got to the place we're at where we need restoration. So I do ocean restoration projects for the last 15 years. I've been restoring kelp forests and putting the actual kelp, the physical algae back in the ocean. It creates forests underwater for 800 different species of animals to live in. And I do that with the help of really cheap labor called students who are in middle school and high school and sometimes elementary school, and they get to grow these organisms for me, and then I have volunteer divers who help me go out in the ocean and plant them in the ocean. So the projects are literally community-based. It takes every facet of the community to get it done, from people who help me write grants and raise money all the way to the printers who help me print things. And I do have all these people networked, who give me a little deal on doing all those things. So using the boats or going out. I just contacted some drone operators yesterday because I need some video of the edge of a point out here on the ocean that nobody wants to fly their drone out to because they're scared to fly it out over the ocean. Well, there's whale watching boats that go out every day and they use drones. So I called them up and said, hey, would you guys mind taking a 2-minute video for me at Abalone Point and let me know what that looks like at high tide? So every facet of my community is involved in the projects. And so kind of cool, you guys are all tech guys, art and tech, and that all goes into science too in this type of project where the whole community is involved in doing.
I remember when you had your talk that I was viewing, that you mentioned a lot about permitting being very tough, and you had to get permits that were essentially appropriate for completely different kinds of projects. Would you mind speaking to that and kind of sharing some insight into maybe ground that has been unbroken or seas that have been unswum through some of these projects that you've done?
Sure. Well, not a lot of people do ocean restoration projects. Matter of fact, there's two other people that do ocean restoration projects here in California. So when I kind of went to the Department of Fish and Wildlife and the state to tell them I was going to be planting kelp or planting abalone or putting something in the ocean, there's no avenue for that. So there's no line to get into when you go to the office. You know, if you're going to build a hotel, if you're going to build a school, if you're going to add on to your house, there's a line for that and there's a form for it. But there's no such thing for doing what I do. So they had to pick a line for me to get in, and it was essentially like I was building an amusement park at the beach or a pier on the beach. And I had to do all the same permitting and reporting that somebody would do if they were building a hotel or a pier right on the beach. So I had to get permits from the state to lease the land from them in order to plant the kelp on it. So remember, this is under the ocean, about 40 feet underwater, and I had to lease the land from the state to put something that already grows naturally in there. That's like the equivalent of saying, I want to plant 100 trees in the park, and them going, well, first you have to rent the land from us to plant the trees on. Doesn't make any sense. But it's just because there's no pathway. So, so I've had a lot of people around the world who will call me and ask me, how do we do a project like you did here in Scotland or in northern Japan or in Australia, and or even here in California, Northern California. Some citizens wanted to get together and do a project, and I said, I don't know how you do it there, but here in California, really you can't unless you go through all these hoops. So it makes it kind of hard for an average everyday citizen to go out and do something good because there's so many different hoops to jump through in order to get permits to do it.
Does anyone have questions on some of the projects that she's done? Ooh, there's a question in the back. What is Kelp
Okay.
Fest?
What was the question?
What is Kelp Fest?
Oh, Kelp Fest is it's a festival that I started in 2010, essentially because I had planted kelp for 15 years in the ocean, and it finally grew back. And so we had all these new animals and places for animals to live, and all the fish were coming back, and we were all happy because we could see it underwater. But kelp also comes loose from the bottom and washes up on the beach. And that provides a whole other habitat for animals, like grunion and seabirds. And anyway, it was washing up on the beach, and the city called me and said, this is no good. We can't have kelp washing up on the beach. Now we have to clean it up. And I said, what? Are you crazy? This is what it's supposed to be like. You've been without it for 30 years, and now you have a perfectly intact ecosystem. And so I realized I had missed educating that entire city, the residents of that city. I had overwhelmingly educated the students because they were growing it, and all the volunteers to help me. But I decided to throw a big party and call it Kelp Fest in the downtown portion of the city. And in order to connect with the community, we had to use every single facet of visual art. So the posters that you see behind me were one of those things. We hung banners all over the city. We actually built kelp forests at the event, so a big public art display. I had kids who were really good at cooking, made seaweed design dishes for people to taste. We had a big mural that was being painted by the community so that they could physically get in the process of creating art with kelp. We created a kelp song, a kelp dance. We had a kind of it was right when America's Got Talent, I think, came out. So we got, America's Got Kelp Talent, and we had people make up songs and dances about kelp for prizes. So we tried to include every facet of visual communications for people who've never been underwater to see the value of having kelp forests again in their community. And it worked.
What is the importance of kelp then?
Great question. I should have said that, huh? Kelp forests are home to over 800 species of animals. So it's kind of like, we don't have coral reefs here in Southern California. So everybody's real familiar now with coral reefs. You know, they are the home of all the reef fish. They have places for the reef fish to hide in. They eat from those reefs. And so we're all familiar with that. Well, the kelp forests are the three-dimensional structures that provide habitat for all the fishes that live in Southern California. And they reproduce there, they eat there, they hide there. Some of them migrate from kelp forest to kelp forest all the way up and down the coast. And if you go fishing in California, you know that's where you go fishing because that's where all the fish are.
I think maybe some of us are a little bit more removed from the ocean, at least while we're living here in Arizona. So do we interact with kelp on a daily basis? Is that something that we can connect to sitting in this room?
Yeah, sure. Kelp is a seaweed that grows 100 feet tall in the ocean, and it's brown algae. And from it, commercial harvesters actually extract a component called alginate. And alginate is used in thousands of products that you use every day, usually processed foods, but things that need to be bound together or that are creamy and smooth. So, for instance, like McDonald's apple pies, that filling in the apple pie is, it's false. It's not a natural ingredient. So they make that creamy, they make it smooth and gelatinous by using alginate. Salad dressings, diet salad dressings, if you take out the cream because you want to save calories and make it fat-free or low-fat, you have to put the alginate in there to make it creamy and smooth, or else it would just be powdery ranch dressing instead of creamy, smooth ranch dressing. It's also used in chocolate milks. So chocolate milk, when you buy it at the grocery store, in the Nesquik bottle, is always bound together, the chocolate and the milk. But when you make it at home, you know that if you mix the chocolate and the milk and let it sit, the chocolate and the milk separate. So they use alginate to bind the chocolate and the milk together, so you never have to shake up the bottle when you buy it at 7-Eleven. So the kelp is something that you guys use on a daily basis. It's in medicinal Gaviscon, it's in Band-Aids, it's in pet food. So it's in a lot of different things that even in Arizona you have contact with.
So if the farmers they get alginate from kelp forests, or harvesters, I guess, they get it from kelp forests, where's the line where do you draw the line where they can harvest alginate and where they can't? Because if kelp forests are already in trouble in Southern California, why are they able to harvest them there?
That's a good question. So they were harvesting from about the beginning of the 1900s. They were harvesting kelp to make ammunition for World War I, because when you burn kelp, it makes potash, which is an ingredient in gunpowder and explosives. So they were harvesting all the way back in like 1913, and up until about 1970s, late 70s, there was plenty of kelp. So the companies that were harvesting for manufacture of alginate had no problems, and then in the 1980s they started seeing the decline in the kelp, so they started trying to do restoration. And by the early 2000s, right when I was starting to do these projects, they actually closed up and moved out of the country because the kelp was so scarce they couldn't use our kelp anymore. So they moved to Scotland. And for them, fortunately, they can use different species of kelps. Ours in Southern California grows the tallest and the fastest and has more biomass than any other kelp on the planet. But they moved to Scotland, and now they're harvesting a different kind of kelp that only grows about 3 feet tall, and they're using that for their alginate. So they have to work harder to get more of it, but they just couldn't get any more from here. So that's a good question. They actually tried to do restoration to protect their product, and it didn't work.
What's the story with the abalone?
So abalone are species that live inside the kelp forest. It's a snail. And here, I have let's see if I can show you a shell. This is an abalone shell. Have you seen that before? This is the inside. Real pretty. Abalone are snails. Not very attractive, but if I got people excited about algae, I think I can get them excited about snails. So the snails taste good, and unfortunately that's a horrible recipe for a lifestyle. So if it tastes good and you're a snail, you're going to be destroyed. Because no matter what, your predator is going to be able to catch you, right? You don't move very fast. So we ate them all. There were 7 species in the United States, and all occur along California, Washington, and Oregon. And from the late 1800s to about 1980, we ate them all. There were millions and millions and millions and millions of them. Just to give you an idea, there were more abalone, so many abalone that a commercial fisherman could take 1,440 of them per day, every day. And there were a lot of commercial fishermen. So that continued for about 25 years, and then finally the fishery collapsed. So this is an important part of the ecosystem. As a biologist, I would have to argue that everything is an important part of the ecosystem. But they actually eat kelp, believe it or not. And their job is to clean up the bottom of the ocean when the kelp leaves fall off. They eat that and keep the bottom clean. So I'm trying to restore them by doing lots of field work to figure out what the populations are, to find out if they're still reproducing. And I've also collected my own abalone, so some that are still left, and have spawned them. And I'm currently raising about 660,000 little children, little baby abalone, up on a farm in Santa Barbara, because they are farmed raised. So the green abalone is the species I work on. Nobody's raising those except for me. But there are 3 farms here in California that actually raise red abalone for commercial sale through aquaculture. And hopefully in the next 10 years, I'm going to be able to restore green abalone. With the help, of course, of thousands of kids that are going to grow them for me in their classroom. And then volunteers are going to help me plant them in the ocean. So right now, basically every low tide, I'm going out with volunteers and we're searching for baby abalone in the tide pools, trying to find out if they're reproducing and get a handle on what the population is doing that's still in the ocean, that's still wild.
So what would happen at the bottom of the kelp forests if there wasn't anything to eat the leaves?
Essentially, it would pile up, kind of like in your backyard. I would think that there are a couple other species that eat that as well. Sea urchins are one of them, but the sea urchins actually had a die-off 2 years ago, where big disease came through. We've had some really tough times here in the Pacific Ocean. 2012, we had all the sea stars in Western North America died. That's kind of catastrophic. No sea stars in the ocean, Pacific Ocean here on the west coast of North America. 2014, we had a warm water blob sitting off the coast, killing off and moving everything out of the area that doesn't like warm water. 2015, we had warm water again. And then this year, the water seems to be cooling off. The warm water is detrimental to the kelp. It can't get the nutrients it needs from that equatorial water. And the animals like the abalone that don't like the warm water but can't swim away from it like fish can, they die. Sea lions starve to death because their food moved north to get into cold water, and they're still down here trying to find food. So this massive death here in the Pacific for the last couple of years. And but that's a natural event, and the ocean can rebound from it. But the problem is that we still expect to be able to take the same things out of it, even though it's been through a rough time. So if we didn't have that pressure on it, it might be okay. But it's kind of suffering right now.
I think the last time I spoke with you, you were waiting for the abalone to hatch or whatever the appropriate term would be. I remember that you mentioned that there was something you were waiting for that was really exciting. What does the lifespan look like from when you raise them to when you can actually put them into the ocean?
The abalone actually were spawned last November, and we're going to be doing 2 or 3 more spawns this year. But what that looks like is essentially clouds of white dots in the water, as the eggs and sperm are microscopic. So we spawn them, we get them to grow in tanks, kind of like aquariums, but it's on a farm, so they're really big tanks. And the abalone right now are about 1.5 millimeters, so they're really small. They take a long time to grow. In order to get to about 3 inches, it's going to take about 6 years to get them that big, and I'm hoping to start planting them in the ocean at about that time, because everything in the ocean eats little tiny abalone, so I want to make sure they're pretty big when I put them out there.
Are we feeling the effects of the Japanese nuclear plant on the west?
Yeah, that was in 2011, and 3 days after that event, the radiation could be detected in the air here in the United States. So that went into the air, we consumed it, it's in the soils, but the ocean takes a lot longer to bring that across the Pacific. So I was actually involved in that project to monitor when it hit the Pacific coast. And we were looking for it in the kelp, actually, because the radiation actually magnifies in the kelp. So the kelp, just like any other plant, takes up nutrients from the ocean. And when the radiation hits the coast, the kelp would have magnified it 2,000 times. So we may have only been able to see tiny bits of it in the water, but we would have been able to pick up lots of it in the kelp. So from Alaska all the way to Chile, we were taking samples of kelp and processing them by drying them and grinding them up and testing them with Geiger counters to watch for the effects of Fukushima that hit our coastline. And we never found it. We tested all the way to 2015, and it never showed up. So it probably assimilated itself into the ecosystem. There was the only other survey that I know that was happening. And by the way, I couldn't get mine funded because nobody wanted to know the answer to that. So when I went out looking for grant money to do that work, grind up the kelp and test for radiation, nobody wanted to give us money for it. Not the Science Foundation, nobody, the government, because then what do you do when you find it? Everybody would panic. So I ended up getting a friend of mine to donate. It was $4,000 is all we did to do all the work, to mail the kelp back and forth to each other and to send it off to get it tested. But the only other study that I know of that happened was a study on tuna in the middle of the Pacific. So tuna, of course, migrate all over the Pacific Ocean, and they're the top of the food chain. So the radiation would have been consumed and taken in by the bottom of the food chain and then made its way up to the top where it would be magnified through a process called bioaccumulation. And he did find it in the tuna at high amount. So another thing we did find was that we couldn't find any radiation in our kelp, but we went to the grocery store and bought Japanese seaweed and tested that, and it was in there. It was radioactive.
Are they testing?
But nobody wanted to know that. We tried telling people and they didn't want to publish it.
Are they testing for radiation in tuna since the nuclear plant went down?
Well, I couldn't understand it.
Are they testing for radiation in the tuna since the power plant went down? Are they testing for radiation as far as human consumption, or are they just not exploring it? They're just saying.
No, nobody wanted to know about human consumption. So he was just out there in the ocean testing. He catch tuna and test the meat in the tuna, and he found it that it had gotten into the food chain. But nobody did anything after that because nobody wants to know the answer to that. You can look up his paper online. He did publish it.
What's his name?
I don't know his name off the top of my head, but Google radioactive testing in pelagic tuna, and the guy's paper should pop up. You can look that. I don't know if you guys know this, but you can always Google scientific research in Google Scholar, which is a totally different search engine than Google. So if you ever want to check the validity of something, you can search there for the paper that was written on it. So Jill, for the next class, show them this video that I sent you first,
Okay.
I think, and then they'll have kind of a baseline of, with some visuals and graphics,
Okay.
and show these guys now of the project, and then I think they'll have a better understanding rather than seeing my talking head. They can see some visuals about what I'm talking about.
Awesome. Okay.
And I think it's only like 8 minutes long.
Well, does anyone have any more questions for our guests before we go to our video?
I was actually wondering, the kelp forest that you help to grow, what other natural hazards do you have to deal with or try to protect them against aside from like warm water?
Yeah, that's it. The changing ocean environment is something that I'm not real sure how to deal with. The kelp can grow in warm water. It just has to have nutrients in it. So the problem with El Nino is that it's a change in the ocean current patterns. So the water comes directly from the equator. And if you've ever been to a tropical place for vacation, you know that the water's really clear there. And it's really clear because there's nothing living in it. It's really dead water. So the kelp can't live on that. It needs the really nutrient-rich water that we have here in the Pacific. So the warm water would be an issue if the currents change, which is possible. But the ocean acidification issue is something that's being tested right now. And they're actually testing it on abalone currently in a lab up in Vega Bay. And we're also looking at it with kelp. The kelp can handle a little bit of acidity as long as the nutrients are there for it. But nobody's really sure how everything's going to do. I have a friend up in Washington State that works on an oyster farm, and they can't grow oysters anymore because of the acidification of the ocean up there. So everything will have to kind of adapt as we do.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you being here.
If anybody ever has any questions, Joe can give you my phone number or email address. Feel free to call me. And if you have any other questions, once you watch this little video, call me back.
Okay. Yeah, I think we have about 13 minutes left of class.
Perfect.
But
Okay, perfect.
share that with them. So just
Okay.
a round of applause for you, and then.
Thank you, guys. Use your talents wisely.
That's what I tell them too.
Bye, Jill. Talk to you later.
Bye. Thank you. Okay. So we have this video, and it's cool.
Was I the only one that noticed that there was a sign in the back saying, "What would you do if you weren't afraid"?
Nancy Caruso is my hero because she has single-handedly led the attack, if you want to call it an attack, on restoring the kelp to our oceans. And the kelp, of course, is the place where the sea life thrives, and we see it every day. 95% depleted when she started, and now it's like a giant garden out in the ocean. Not only has she done that, but she's inspired a whole community of people with her Kelp Fest to follow her and get involved with her and participate in this process. And last but absolutely not least, she has gone into inner city schools, and she's had these young people who probably have never seen the ocean, raising kelp and abalone and sea bass and coming back to the ocean to release them. And what an inspiration she's been, not only for the ocean, but for the future of the custodians of the ocean. Thank you, Nancy Caruso.
My name is Nancy Caruso. I'm a marine biologist and the founder and executive director of Get Inspired. Get Inspired is a nonprofit organization dedicated to inspiring passion and purpose through the discovery of arts and sciences. Get Inspired has a program called the Orange County Ocean Restoration Project. That project was started in 2002 in an effort to restore the kelp forests of Orange County. The kelp forest disappeared about 30 years ago, and not many people notice it because they're invisible, they're underwater. So you could drive down to the beach and it would look just like it did 30 years ago, except there wasn't any kelp underwater. Not many people get the chance to go under there and see what it looks like, but it really does look like a forest when it's nice and healthy. Kelp is also actually in thousands of products that we as consumers use on a daily basis. So things you probably would never have thought of, like stuffed olives or Band-Aids or Mrs. Fields apple pies, Mrs. Fields cookies, McDonald's apple pies, blueberry waffles, diet salad dressing, cream puffs. Alginate actually is the compound that's extracted from the kelp. Alginate is used to thicken and make things creamy and smooth. And so imagine, if you will, if you've ever made a glass of chocolate milk at home and you use this, either the powder or the syrup, and you pour a big, tall, cold glass of milk, and then you pour your syrup or your powder in there, and you stir it up, and it's nice and chocolatey, and then the phone rings. So you walk away from the chocolate milk. You come back 15 minutes later, the chocolate's on the bottom of the glass, right? Well, have you ever bought a chocolate milk from school or from 7-Eleven and you open it up, you don't have to shake it. The chocolate never separates from the milk. You know why? Algae. So we got all these people together who cared, and they were empowered to restore it, grow it again in their classrooms. The kids were growing little tiny microscopic spores of algae, and they got excited that it was being planted in the ocean. The volunteers were out there monitoring it, making sure it was growing and planting it just in the right spots. And over a period of about 10 years, we were able to bring the kelp forest back. And that's important because over 800 different species rely on them. So lobsters and abalone and sheephead and kelp bass and halibut and snails and all of the things that we think of when we think of life off of our coast, they all rely on those kelp forests. They're considered the rainforests of the sea. So we were able to restore those with the help of all those people, and all of them took ownership in the kelp to the point where they'd come and ask, how's our kelp doing? And I got to say, it's doing great. So KelpFest was started in 2009, and it came out of a need to kind of explain to the community that they now have a kelp forest to take care of and to love. And the kelp had come back and it was starting to flourish, and people were talking about it. You could go places and hear, oh, have you seen the kelp? But there was also kelp washing up on the beaches because that's natural. As the kelp, actually, each frond of the kelp lives for only about 4 to 6 months. And it breaks off and floats off into the ocean, and it's responsible for carrying the reproductive spores with it to spread around the ocean. But it also washes up on the beach, and that's a whole other ecosystem called kelp rack. The people who live along the coast actually started to complain. There's kelp on the beaches, and there hasn't been kelp here for 30 years. And so I started pulling pictures from the 1800s and early 1900s and showing people what the beaches are supposed to look like, but it wasn't helping. So KelpFest was born, and now it's blossomed into a musical event and 2,000 participants, arts and crafts and public art projects, and invite artists. One of the big things with KelpFest is to have people have an appreciation for kelp. We've got to show them what it looks like. And again, not everybody goes underwater, so we display it visually as many different ways as we possibly can. There'll be all different types of visualizations for people to connect to the kelp. And then they'll also have a chance to eat it and paint it and draw it themselves. So hopefully they walk away that day saying, hey, that kelp stuff, that's not that bad, and it's actually kind of pretty. That's the goal of the KelpFest. So after the restoration of the kelp forests, we started thinking about, well, what else needs help in our local waters? So we came up with green abalone and white sea bass, both of which were dwindling, the numbers were dwindling, and the green abalone is on its way to being endangered. Baby abalone, when they're born, are actually planktonic, meaning they float in the ocean on the surface currents, and they're microscopic, you can't even see them. So when the students get them in their classrooms, we actually have nurseries in the classrooms, and they hold about 23 gallons of water, and right now they're getting abalone. They're about 3 years old, so they come from local farms, and they're about this big, and the students now, they have eyes, they can make contact with them and look at them, they name them and put little beads on them to identify them, we measure them, and of course feed them. There's actually a Facebook page for green abalone. We're watching to see if our restoration takes, if it's successful, and if it is, then it's a recipe for restoration of the species up and down the coast. Not everybody knows that there's lots of art in science. It takes a lot of creativity to do what we're doing because no one's ever done it before. The white sea bass is a commercially and recreationally very important species in Southern California. They get to about 5 feet long and about 90 pounds. The numbers of those species were also dwindling, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife is a partner with Get Inspired on all these projects. And we also partner with Hub SeaWorld Research Institute on the white sea bass project. So they spawn them in their tanks down there, and then they give us the little babies, and the students up here in Orange County take care of them and raise them. They grow very fast. They can grow about 3 to 4 inches in about 4 or 5 months. And so the students are taking care of the tank, making the seawater, testing the chemistry daily, and of course feeding them as much as they'll eat. And we can release them in the ocean. They don't become dinner for another type of fish. But we've actually taken students underwater with the fish to release them in the kelp forest. Students have got scuba certified. They swim over and hide in the kelp just like they're supposed to. There's absolutely nothing like a crystal clear day underwater with bright shining sun coming through the canopy of the kelp, where it looks like a stained glass window and makes the light dance on the bottom of the ocean floor. And you can just lay upside down and watch it dance. It's beautiful. There's nothing like it.
So kind of cool. If you do have questions or concerns that she can probably answer better than I can, I will be sending out an email like I did last time with her information, with a link to this video. And this actually has been streamed to YouTube. So if you would like to revisit anything later, and then anyone who wasn't able to join us today will also get to view it, you are welcome to do that. I'll send that link out as soon as I receive it from the gentleman I've been working with to make sure that's on YouTube. So.
You know that kelp, when it washes up on the beach, it's a nuisance. I'm from California, and I go to Newport and
Right.
Mission Beach and Orange County and Newport. Can't be the other one. But when it washes up, there's flies. It's really sticky, and you don't want to be next to it, even if it's a nice day at the beach.
Right.
That's how much of a nuisance it is. So I can see them complaining, but then the flip side of it, you don't know what's going on in the water.
Right, that's true. Especially if it hasn't been there before and you're like, you said this was an ocean restoration project, now there's
Well, it's
stuff.
always been there as long as I know, as long as I've been going to